Shalom. Welcome to Hayom. I'm Rabbi Arnold Rachlis. We have with us today the new president of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, Ira Silverman. President Silverman was educated at Princeton and at Harvard, was a director of admissions and a faculty member at Princeton. He served as director of the Institute for Public Policy Planning and Research of the Synagogue Council of America, and was director of special programs for the American Jewish Committee. Moment magazine called President Silverman one of the young Jews to watch in the 80s. Ira, we're very happy to have you with us.
Happy to be here with you, Arnie.
Tell us a little bit about Reconstructionism. People know the terms Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox Judaism, but Reconstructionism is a fairly new movement.
Indeed. In fact, the movement really was founded this century here in the United States by Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan, who this summer will celebrate his 101st birthday, alive and well. It was Rabbi Kaplan's notion that Judaism ought to be seen as the evolving religious civilization of our people, of the Jewish people. And as such, it is the responsibility of each generation to reinterpret, to reconstruct, hence the name, its own interpretation of the Jewish tradition in light of its own needs, its own scientific knowledge, its own emotional outlook, and so forth.
How's Reconstructionism different than the other three major religious movements?
Well, there are several tenets to Reconstructionism which I think will give you some notion of its distinctions. Reconstructionist Judaism sees Judaism as the evolving religious civilization of our people, and thereby committed to change and to growth in ways that more traditional Judaism, particularly represented by Orthodoxy, has not accepted. In addition, Reconstructionism places an emphasis on the fact that American Jews live astraddle two civilizations. We've inherited two magnificent legacies, the American and the Judaic, and it's our responsibility to integrate the two, to synthesize the best of the two cultures which we inherit. In addition, Reconstructionist Judaism was really the first of these movements, of these schools of thought, to emphasize the equality of women and men in Jewish religious life and Jewish life more generally. In fact, it was Rabbi Kaplan's daughter, Judith Kaplan Eisenstein, who was the first bat mitzvah in Jewish history.
And Reconstructionists have women rabbis
as
well.
Our Reconstructionist Rabbinical College ordains women as well as men, and our women rabbis serve in congregations all around the country.
What about theologically? Reconstructionism is traditionally maybe to the right of Reform and the left of Conservative, but in theology it's quite progressive.
Yes, it was Rabbi Kaplan's notion, and that of his followers, Rabbi Eisenstein, who succeeded him, and other Reconstructionist thinkers, that while there's great magnificent beauty in Jewish tradition and in our notions of God and the relationship of God to the Jewish people and the land of Israel, that it was necessary, given the temperament and knowledge of Americans of the 20th century, to reject notions of the supernatural, certainly of an intervening supernatural God, certainly of an anthropomorphic, human-like figure in the skies or heavens. And so Reconstructionist Judaism has placed a more significant emphasis on the God within us, the human forces that work for good, while certainly recognizing the transcendent values which our tradition teaches us.
What kinds of people are attracted to Reconstructionism? You know, very often it's said that intellectuals are attracted because the theology is so sophisticated that it's very...
There's a certain level of abstraction which has certainly made the movement more appealing to those who are into reading, for instance. Kaplan wrote hundreds of thousands of pages, Rabbi Eisenstein as well, and there's a great body of literature, but that's really true of all of Judaism. Our movement is made up of very diverse people all around the country. We have scores, 50-plus congregations all around the country, large congregations, small ones, chavarot and fellowships. And I think the body is very diverse.
You mentioned chavarot. The Reconstructionist movement pioneered chavarot 20 or 30 years ago.
That's right.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Some of them may have started as small study groups, simply to read the traditional Jewish sources, thinking of Rabbi Kaplan, Rabbi Eisenstein, and other early Reconstructionist thinkers. They developed well beyond that into groups which saw the value of the intimacy of small, extended families, fellowships, which could worship together, express their beliefs together, share their ideas, their questions together, celebrate the holidays together, educate their children together. Such fellowships or chavarot have become more numerous and more popular in all walks of Jewish life in just the last few years.
Do you see Reconstructionism as a catalyst movement? I mean, the first bat mitzvah, equality of women, chavurot, is it just supplying other movements with good ideas?
Right.
Or does
I think that's not just. That's a pretty important element. Another tenet of Reconstructionist Judaism is the need to strive always toward the worldwide unity of the Jewish people, Klal Yisrael. It was never the intention of the founders of this movement, nor of its current leadership, to separate itself out into a separate sect which would keep its wisdom to itself. Rather, to infuse these ideas, which we think ought to characterize progressive Judaism of the 20th century, particularly in the United States, to infuse these ideas more broadly in the other movements or schools of thought in Jewish life, including the Orthodox, Conservative, Reform. All Jews ought to be able to benefit from the thinking, say, on the issue of the equality of women, or the need to strive toward Klal Yisrael, or the integration of the two cultures in which we live, or the evolving nature of the civilization.
What do you think Moment magazine meant when it said that you're one of the young American Jews to watch in the 80s?
Well, here I am being watched. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you. I think what the editors of the magazine probably meant was that there is a small group of relatively young Jews, I'm in my 30s, who have sought to exercise some leadership in the community to create a Jewish renewal, a revival of intense excitement of American Jews in their Judaism. There are so many ways to express our Jewishness. Identification with Israel has been among the most important ways in the years since the establishment of the state, and remains a central element of our self-identification. But it goes well beyond that kind of expression. That is, the potential for excitement in Judaism includes spiritual involvement in Jewish life, prayer, communal gathering, tzedakah, giving, supporting Jewish philanthropic institutions, working toward the support of Israel, toward the support of Jews in other countries who may be in need. There are so many ways, and there are some of us, and I would like to count myself among them, who have elected to devote our professional careers to working toward the heightening of that kind of Jewish excitement.
How do you think that your roles at the Synagogue Council of America, where you were research director of the Institute of Public Policy Planning and Research, and at the American Jewish Committee, where you were National Programming Director, how do you think that those positions and your Director of Admissions position in Princeton, how do they prepare you for this position as president of a rabbinical college?
Well, I think rather selfishly, I benefited enormously from my own participation in those particular positions. I hope that I also served the community well in those functions, but I learned an enormous amount. In my years as Director of Research for the Synagogue Council, I was able, as I say selfishly, to delve into so many areas of Jewish life: Jewish communal life, Jewish public or community policy, Jewish religious learning, which I never studied formally, but which I was able to study in depth in those years, including the thinking of Rabbi Kaplan and Reconstructionist thought. I thereby, in those years, gained a very firm footing in the issues of Jewish community policy and these other areas which I studied. I put them into more active practice in policymaking in my position of responsibility at the American Jewish Committee, where I was in charge of nationwide programs in intergroup relations and Jewish community relations. I think that served me well in understanding the external issues which face American Jewry today: our relations with other groups, our political involvement in having an impact on the political process in support of Israel, and other social action aims which we have in mind, all of which are integral to the thinking and action of our Reconstructionist movement.
Do you think Reconstructionism is in the forefront of what you term Jewish renewal?
Yes, I do think so. I think that our ideas are progressive and will enable those who partake of them to find the kind of excitement in Jewish life. I think it too has to evolve and change. We're not talking just about a rigid Reconstructionist doctrine, a dogmatic approach to looking at Judaism. I think we have to take Kaplan's dictum seriously, that each generation has the right, indeed the responsibility, to reinterpret the Jewish tradition as we need it, because Judaism is evolving and growing, Judaism being the beliefs and practices of our people. So we can be, to use the cliche, on the cutting edge of new Jewish movements, and we've been very much involved in the Havurah movement and other new movements toward Jewish renewal.
Let's talk about the college.
Okay.
It's located in Philadelphia.
That's right.
It is possibly on the verge of getting a whole new building and campus in the next few months. Tell us about the program there, the types of students that are there, what a student studies, and how it's different from other major rabbinical schools.
Sure. The principal difference, or perhaps there are two. One is our size. It's a very small school. We have some 50 students, graduate students, studying for the title of rabbi. And in its smallness, and in the college's own youth, this is our bat mitzvah year, our 13th year, in its smallness, we can be flexible, homey, friendly, in a warm way. I wouldn't want to denigrate the other major, wonderful, magnificent rabbinic institutions, but ours is small and intimate in a way that those larger institutions really can't be, and more flexible in many respects. Beyond that, we take a new and different curricular approach based on the thinking of Reconstructionist outlook. We look at Judaism in a civilizational way, Judaism as an evolving religious civilization, and we therefore structure our curriculum, the 5-year course of study leading to the title of rabbi, along civilizational lines, the first year being the biblical, the second the rabbinic or Talmudic period, the third the medieval, the fourth the modern period, defined as roughly from the 18th century Enlightenment through to the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, including the Holocaust. And then the final year, the contemporary period, where we're dealing with current modern Jewish thought problems.
It's a radical approach to equate different levels, different eras of Jewish civilization as equal, to take them each seriously.
That's right. They are each taken very seriously and in depth, or as much as the time permits. I shouldn't want to suggest that the arbitrary divisions are mandated by any higher force. They are arbitrary divisions, but they are characterized in different ways with different bodies of literature, and we study them. Not absolutely equally. The time slotting is flexible, although we do allocate about a year for the principal study, the core courses in those areas.
What kind of student are you looking for?
Exciting, good students. and I think we find them. If it's not inappropriate, I can say that you were one of those students.
I was.
And
glad I was.
With a magnificent record and subsequent career. We're looking for students who have the capacity to lead as rabbis in the future, and toward that end, have the capacity to study and learn what we have to offer. I don't think we have a tight mold. We're not looking solely for erudition, for scholarship, nor are we looking for the glad-hander who might in some ways be serve well in some rabbinic functions, but really doesn't have the intellectual capacity to benefit from what we have to offer. So we're looking for a mix of students who, at minimum, have the intelligence and the intellectual thirst to learn what we have to offer, and who also, as we judge it, have the personal capacities, the leadership capacities, to serve as rabbis, as teachers, as congregational rabbis, as campus advisors, Hillel rabbis, as scholars.
What about the diversity of the student body now? Can you tell us what either some of the graduates are doing or some of the students are doing in an extracurricular way that really will give us an idea of how diverse the student body is?
In fact, the students do so many things in extracurricular activities, in large measure as a result of our requirement that they all serve in some community service capacity, so that one of our students serves as a chaplain in a hospital dealing with very sick patients and does a magnificent job preparing himself for a career, I think, in that kind of service chaplaincy role. Several work as student rabbis in congregations and practice dealing with congregants in pastoral roles, in homiletics and sermons, in life cycle officiation. Others work with students on campus in Hillel foundations or other campus activity organizations.
How do you
others teach.
How do you take an enthusiastic young man or woman who comes out of college, a good college, has good Hebrew or Judaic background, and turn them into a good rabbi?
Yeah. Well, We recognize that so many qualities go into making a good rabbi. We need to emphasize the personal sensitivity that's necessary to fulfill the rabbinic roles that are so multifaceted. So we do try to emphasize, especially given our smallness, the practical rabbinics segment, pastoral counseling, interactive processes, lots of fancy names for dealing with people effectively. And we emphasize that well, and our students come out well prepared as a result. We also seek to educate them most fully in Jewish texts, in the magnificent tradition from which we draw and on which we base our approach to Judaism. We recognize that 5 years isn't enough, so we simply aim, and it's no simple task, to give our students the tools to continue a lifelong process of learning and studying as they serve as rabbis.
You know, what's so impressive is that usually a rabbi graduates or is ordained by a certain movement, and he or she remains within that movement. But Reconstructionist rabbis have been accepted by Reform, Conservative, and Reconstructionist synagogues all across the country.
Right.
And
there's a paradox at work here.
Yeah.
I think a good one, but it is a paradox. We have to establish some institutions to foster the ideas which we hold dear in the Reconstructionist approach to Judaism. Hence the establishment of our college 13 years ago, and the creation of a foundation, a movement to service congregations that call themselves Reconstructionist around the country. But at the same time as we do that, we seek to aim toward the worldwide unity of our people, which I discussed earlier, and therefore don't want to create, to erect, or perpetuate barriers among denominations, sects. So we actually encourage our graduates to work with all Jews, with other Jews, in conservative congregations, in Reform congregations, in unaffiliated congregations, as well as those growing number of congregations which call themselves Reconstructionists.
what would you say to a congregation that said to you, what can a Reconstructionist rabbi offer us that someone within our own denomination, quote unquote, can't offer us?
For one thing, we're particularly proud on an ad hominem basis of our graduates. We think that they're just superb, and they often stack up well just in the marketplace with other candidates for those positions. So at a personal level, we think we have a very good graduate in the case of most of our alumni. But beyond that, we think that the approach that they take toward Judaism, toward a living, vital Judaism, is very special and may serve a congregation well. Which isn't to say, of course, that other graduates of Reform and conservative institutions can't also have those qualities, but we're pretty certain that those we graduate do.
What's the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College doing insofar as educating its rabbis in feeling a special feeling for Israel? Does it have a program in Israel, or do some of its students in their early years spend time in Israel?
Yes, we're working toward the regularization of a full student program in Israel. As it is now, we do encourage virtually all of our students to take 1 year in Israel, on leave, but gaining credit in Israel, studying one of the core periods. We have faculty members in Israel who guide them through a directed year of study there. It improves their skills, it improves their, particularly in Hebrew language, and in whatever they study there, as well as giving them a sense of the unity of our people even across the seas, the homeland of the Jewish people in Israel. Reconstructionist Judaism was always, since its founding, devoted to the notion of a Jewish homeland, a Zionist ideal, and remains obviously very supportive of.
Where would you place,
the state of Israel?
you know, before I said that ritually Reconstructionists are thought of falling between Reform and Conservative, and theologically more progressive. Is that a comfortable way of referring to Reconstructionism for you, or do you have a different
No, I think that's probably
way?
right. I'm always reluctant to talk about right and left on a spectrum as if we were political parties, but I think it is accurate to say that ritually, liturgically, particularly because of our people's interest in drawing from the Hebrew tradition, we would fall somewhere between the conservative and Reform liturgical styles. We use a lot of Hebrew, a lot of song. Judith Kaplan-Eisenstein was one of the leading researchers and writers about Jewish music, and our tradition has been infused with a love of Jewish traditional music and the development of new use of song in prayer and elsewhere, so that our style of communal service is probably between conservative and Reform, and that's fair. Theologically or ideologically, it's certainly more radical. It has more progressive ideas. Again, I wouldn't characterize it as right or left, but I think it has been characterized by a greater willingness to evolve. It also sees Judaism comprehensively as a religious civilization rather than as a profession of faith, which was a central element of at least classic American Reform Judaism. I think Reform Judaism itself has evolved tremendously over these last decades to a point where it too recognizes the reality of Judaism being a much more comprehensive civilization.
Tell us about your background. We've known each other for about a year now, but that isn't something I know about. Tell me, religiously, culturally, educationally, what's your Jewish background?
I grew up in New York in a family that was certainly affirmatively Jewish, positively identifying. I talk about my mother as being a cardiac Jew, that is, she has a good Jewish heart. But there wasn't a depth of learning Jewishly within our home, which would have led me to this position naturally. Although I was a participant in Sunday school and Hebrew school and learned a basis from which to grow. A high school age trip to Israel was really the stunning change in my approach to Judaism, as I realized firsthand the connection between us, Jews here and those in Israel and in the rest of the world over time and over space. And it was a great, powerful impact. The romantic development of the state of Israel, this was in the early 60s, was very exciting to me, enough so that when I came back and went to college, I studied Hebrew and maintained a strong interest in college and through graduate school in Israel affairs.
You were a correspondent for an Israeli newspaper.
And when I left Princeton, where I was on the faculty for some years, went to Washington to work on some public policy issues, I began moonlighting as the Washington correspondent for Yediot Achronot, one of the Israeli dailies, and then subsequently for the Jerusalem Post. And over the course of a year or two of doing that and becoming involved daily in the issues of the Jewish people, public policy, and other issues, religious issues, the comprehensive nature of our people, I decided that I simply wanted to devote myself professionally to serving the Jewish people, originally, as I said earlier, through the public affairs realm, and more recently on what might be defined more narrowly as religious or spiritual values, but I see them as all of a piece.
Who have been your mentors along the way? Either people you've met through books or you've met in person.
Yeah. I'm deeply devoted to my good friend, in fact, the godfather of one of my children, Marver Bernstein, the president of Brandeis University, who led me in my years at Princeton when he was dean of the Woodrow Wilson School, where I was student and faculty member, to understand what I think Rabbi Kaplan was writing about, that one can well synthesize the teachings of our Jewish tradition and our American tradition. He is a teacher of American government, this at a time when Princeton wasn't a nurturing ground of Jewish life, and he really showed me the way to apply Jewish values to our public policy, American issues, and conversely to apply American democratic values, which we cherish, to our Jewish communal observance. Through books, Rabbis Kaplan and Eisenstein were great inspirations for me, which is why I jumped at the chance to try to walk in their shoes and carry on the traditions which they've developed in founding our movement.
What would be your goals now you've been president for a little less than a year.
That's right.
So after you've been president for 5 years or 10 years, what would be your goals within the movement?
I see the college as a center of Jewish thought, not the academy, not the classic intellectual center, which some European and some American institutions have aspired to be, but as a place where new Jewish thinking can take place comfortably, a safe place for new ideas, for the development of new liturgy, of a new literature, while we also work to create new leaders. I think they go hand in hand together. That's what I'm seeking to build. I see the movement as being an integral part of that. We don't do these things in a vacuum. It isn't a top-down process where we at some college decide what Jews ought to be saying in their prayer, after all, a most intimate and personal thing. It can be a place where we can experiment back and forth with a body of Jews, of our community, of our people, who will experiment. You're a congregational rabbi. We can send you a new poem commemorating the Holocaust, or a new way of observing Rosh Chodesh, emphasizing perhaps the the feminine characteristics that may be overlooked elsewhere in Jewish tradition. You can try it out. Tell us how your congregation feels about it. Change some things that feel better to you. It's an interplay back and forth.
The movement is very egalitarian. I mean, usually we think of the term egalitarian meaning equality between men and women, recently, but I think the movement really doesn't operate through a hierarchy. The faculty and the students and the administrators, the institution, really have formed a community in Philadelphia. It is somewhere between an established institution and a very active center of Jewish learning and being.
Right. I think we're still small, and I don't envision a magnificent expansion in quantitative terms, although slightly larger student body and faculty, particularly in our new campus, which we hope to occupy in the next several months, may enable us to move on that path toward becoming a significant center of Jewish thought, of creative new thinking, which we're beginning to do now. We have a terrific faculty. Students are very much a part of that. And in interaction with our communities, I think we're well on the way toward that vision.
How do you think Reconstructionism will be received in the American Jewish community over the next 10 to 15 years?
A corollary of the paradox we were discussing before about institutionalization and sectarianism is that so much of the ideas of Reconstructionism have already become well infused in the other movements, which may lead people to ask, well, what do we need this for? Well, the reason we need it is that those ideas are still evolving and changing, and we're in a position to continue to infuse ideas in the other movements or just among Jews generally.
Do you think the Jews are becoming more observant or more religious, if not necessarily observant? Is there something, as you look at the American Jewish community, something dominant that's happening?
I think one should first take note of the real achievements in growth and dedication of the modern Orthodox community, which has maintained and grown a strong commitment to interpretation of Jewish law as they see it, and that's certainly a vital segment of Judaism. Outside of the Orthodox community, I see a similar quest to find meaning, order in our lives through Judaism. It doesn't necessarily take the form of ritual observance, but I do see a real yearning for spiritual development, which may not have been as obvious 2 or 3 decades ago, or even a decade ago. I think it's part of a general American trend toward looking for religious meaning.
I want to thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure to have you here speaking with us. If you want to contact President Silverman, you can reach him at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, 2308 North Broad Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 19132. And we also hope you'll contact us here at WJUF. Let us know ideas, suggestions for future programs. WJUF, 1 South Franklin Street, Chicago. Thanks for being with us. Please join us again very soon on Hayom.